Great. Well, thank you and welcome everyone. And thank you for attending our webinar. We are excited to have you for the IMA Student Series Accounting and Finance Professional Panel. This is the 7th time that we have held a panel session like this. And each time the turnout has been wonderful. And we're excited to have you students here with us today. We are looking forward to the discussion. I always look forward to see where the discussion goes from what we have planned, just based on what questions come in. So this is usually a very fun and relaxed hour that you'll spend with IMA. So this session is being recorded, and we will send out the recording after this panel event, and we will also be housing it on our YouTube series. Everyone should be muted upon entry, but we encourage you while you're attending this webinar to ask questions using the Q&A function. There will be some questions that we will be able to answer directly, and then for others, we're going to save those questions for the end and some for our panelists. All right, before we get started, we would like to take a moment to thank our sponsor for today's webinar, Gleim Exam Prep. Gleim Exam Prep has helped accountants pass millions of certification exams since 1974. Gleim is an IMA strategic partner, the exclusive course provider for the IMA's CMA Scholarship Program, and a proud sponsor of this webinar. Gleim is family owned and operated from the beginning, and Gleim is committed to helping you pass your CMA exam and achieve professional success. My name is Mary Patterson, and I will be your host and moderator for tonight's webinar. My role with IMA is the Academic Business Development Manager. I'm your point of contact for everything academic related to IMA. Please write down my email. And honestly, you might not think of a question during this panel event, but a day from now, 2 days from now, 2 months from now, if a question comes up, please feel free to reach out to me. All right, let's take a look at today's agenda. I will be giving a quick overview of IMA and also the CMA and FMAA certification. Then we will get right into the panel discussion, where I will be asking our panelists several questions. At the end, we will take some time to take questions from the audience. Throughout the webinar, our team will be monitoring the Q&A. If you have questions for us or the panel, put them in the Q&A box and we will try to answer them as we go. We also wanted to take a minute to share how far along this webinar series has come. As I said, this is our 7th installment of the student series. We received such great feedback on this program, which is why we continue to hold it. We are always trying to improve, so be sure to fill out the feedback survey at the end of the webinar. If you'd like to have the playback recordings from previous sessions, you can visit IMA's YouTube page and watch the other 6 previously recorded webinars in this series. You can scan the QR code on the screen and it will take you right to IMA's YouTube page. That is where this recording will also be uploaded once we get a chance to make a few edits. I just wanted to highlight a few of the profiles of the panelists we've had in the past to give you an idea of the broad range of positions available for accounting and finance graduates. This doesn't include all of our past panelists, but we wanted to highlight a few companies and titles. So just looking at this screen, we've had a panelist from Amazon, Dell Technologies, Nike, Microsoft, Barstool Sports. So the panelists that are joining us today are in good company, and we love adding to the people that help speak to you, the students. All of our panelists have their CMA, and some also hold other credentials like the CPA. We always try to find a nice mix of companies and panelists for you to hear from. So let's start first quickly with some information about IMA. IMA is a global association with more than 140,000 members who are accounting and finance professionals working in business. Our organization has more than 300 professional and student chapters located in cities and campuses around the world. By joining IMA, students and professionals have the opportunity to not only network with accounting and financial professionals in your local area, but it also opens the door to network with professionals from all over the world. IMA offers resources for accounting and finance educators, as well as 3 globally recognized certifications. With the addition of the FMAA certification, along with the CMA and CSCA, IMA is reinforcing its position as the foremost association for professionals working in accounting and finance roles in industry. This slide highlights the 3 certifications offered by IMA. Today's webinar will focus on the FMAA, which is our newest certification, and the CMA, which each of our panelists have, and we'll be talking to you about how it has helped their career. As you can see by looking at each of the certifications, IMA is there for accounting and finance professionals for every stage in your career journey. I'm going to give you a very quick general overview of what the FMAA certification is, since it is brand new. The FMAA instills the fundamental knowledge and competencies in accounting and finance, allowing students and professionals to showcase their expertise to employers and build a foundation to expand their skills. This certification was developed to address market needs. Based on the input from the market, the FMAA certification was developed with 5 key content domains. General accounting and financial management, that covers things like accounting terminology, debits and credits, T accounts, and adjusting entries. There's also financial statement preparation and analysis. That's dealing with asset and liability evaluation, basic financial statement analysis, and profitability ratios. The FMAA covers planning and budgeting, so budgeting concepts and methodologies, and cost management and performance metrics, such as cost measurement concepts, variable and fixed overhead expenses, performance measurement, and then also because IMA takes ethics so seriously, there is some professional ethics. The reason why we tell you about this new certification is because, as you can see on what's tested, this is all information that you're probably doing right now in a lot of your classes. So you are primed and ready to sit for this truly at any stage in your early accounting education. I get questions from students about, well, what is the FMAA certification? The exam format is a 2-hour exam with 80 multiple choice questions. There are no eligibility requirements, so this is an exam that you can take while you're in school. The exam preparation time is approximately 50 hours, and the exam is starting to be given in March 2024. So basically tomorrow, no, 2 days from now, people can start taking the FMAA. I forgot that it's a leap year. All right, let's move on to the CMA, which is what most people recognize when they think about IMA and the Institute of Management Accountants. So with this slide, I'm going to provide you with a high-level overview of the test topics. And of course, you can find more details about this on the IMA website. The CMA exam is composed of 2 parts, testing your fluency in both accounting and finance. The exams are each 4 hours in length, starting with 100 multiple choice questions and concluding with 2 essay scenarios, which are like mini cases. Part 1 of the exam is called Financial Planning, Performance, and Analytics, and it has 6 sections. It will cover things like financial statements, budgeting process, variance analysis, and best practices in internal controls and data analytics. A lot of what you will be seeing in this part of the exam will come from your cost or managerial classes and your intermediate financial accounting classes. Part 2 is called the Strategic Financial Management. It also has 6 sections, and you'll see that it includes more finance-related topics. This section will cover things like financial ratios, risk and return models, variable and fixed cost, best practices in enterprise risk management, capital budgeting techniques, and ethics. So hopefully these topics all sound familiar to you because the content covered on the CMA exam is very relevant. And I'm sure our panelists would tell you that it is important to have a mastery of these skills when you start working. A couple things about the exam is that it can be taken in any order. So if you are a finance student, you might feel stronger to take maybe part 2 first. I know, especially when I deal with my accountants, you all really love to follow the rules. So you like to start with part 1 and then move into part 2. Again, with the CMA, you can take this exam while you are still in school, but this would be an exam that's going to be later in your educational career, usually after your junior year of studies in your advanced accounting classes. So again, this just highlights the different certifications that we have. And it shows you how it fits in with who can take the different parts of the exam or different certifications. And as I said, all of our panelists, they have their CMA. So that's where they are as young working professionals. Another thing that I always like to tell students just as a benefit from IMA, being a student member of IMA, is that you can take several of our courses at no cost. The 2 courses we are showing here are 2 of our more popular courses. We have our Data Analytics and Visualization Fundamental Certificate and our Robotics Process Automation RPA series. These courses are meant to give you some foundational understanding of these topics. What's also nice about them is that when you complete each course, you will receive a professional certificate from IMA and a digital badge that you can add to your LinkedIn profile. In addition to these courses, we have several free courses available to students in technology and analytics, soft skills, and more. To become a member, it is just $25. And both of these courses, along with others, help to build your knowledge and skill set that will set you apart from your peers. So we hope that you do take advantage of these courses if you decide to become a student member of IMA. Another event just for the students that I want to make you aware of. Before we get into this panel set discussion, I want to let you know about another panel that we have planned next month. Today's panel discussion will involve young professionals and getting their aspect of their career. Now, this panel session will focus more on, I don't want to say that they're old professionals because they're not, but professionals that have been working in industry for more than 20 years. And I think both events will give you great insight to how rewarding a career can be in accounting and finance. And you can register using that QR code. Again, we have someone from Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, and Starbucks. And then lastly, please mark your calendars and check with your school and accounting department for funds to send you to our Student Leadership Conference in Anaheim, California next November. So mark your calendars for that. So I've talked enough. I think it's time for us to finally get into and meet our panel. So for today's webinar, we have a fantastic panel of accounting and finance professionals joining us to share their insights and experience. Let's get started and meet our panelists, and you will notice that they are all CMAs. So first we have Megan McGourty, who is a finance director for Johnson & Johnson. Next, we have Christie Lui. Christie is a senior director of financial analysis and planning with iSpot TV. Our third panelist is Mason Bussey, who started his career with Becton Dickinson and is now a full-time MBA student at NYU. And finally, we have Drew Chancey. Drew is a senior financial analyst with Habitat for Humanity. So that's our panel. Everyone give a wave. I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick so we can have our panelists be more front and center. Okay. And Megan, I see that you came back. I think we lost you there for a second. So I
was out for a minute. That storm in our area just kicked off my internet. So apologies, connections sporadic at all.
I'll tell you what, so I'm in Pittsburgh, so we sent them your way. Those are some nasty storms. So
yeah.
All right, let's get into our panel discussion. All right, the first question for our panelists are, Would you briefly describe your career after graduating undergrad? Provide some details about your current company and your responsibilities within your role. So, for example, I'm sure everyone, for the most part, is familiar with Habitat for Humanity, but might not necessarily understand the role that an accountant plays with the company. So, Drew, you can talk to us a little bit about your career. We'll let you kick this off.
Sure. Thanks, Mary. So my name is Drew Chancey. As Mary mentioned, I'm a senior financial analyst with Habitat for Humanity International. And so I started out my career in the nonprofit industry after graduating from Oklahoma State University with a bachelor's degree in accounting. And so prior to serving with Habitat, I had the opportunity to serve with two separate nonprofit organizations, primarily on the accounting side. In my first role, I had an opportunity to work directly with the CFO of the organization on financial reporting, and also had the opportunity to undertake some project management responsibilities, which was a great opportunity for me. In my second role, prior to joining Habitat, I served as director of finance for a nonprofit organization here in the Tulsa area, and was responsible for all of the accounting, finance, and human resource functions of the organization. And in March of 22, I earned my CMA, and that was a month before I joined Habitat for Humanity. And in my current role, I support two of Habitat's programs, which are focused on providing capital to low-income communities. One of those is an international program, which is the Microbuild Fund, and that is focused on providing microfinance loans to allow individuals to build homes. And then the other program is the New Market Tax Credit Program, which is a U.S. program, again, focused on providing capital to low-income communities. And so in both of those roles, both of those projects, I help support the financial compliance and financial reporting functions as we work to serve out the mission there. So I think that's a little bit about my career.
I'm sure a lot of professors listening, they heard things, they're like, yes, that's what we're going over. I've talked about this in class, so that's great. Megan, I'll move over to you. So same question, could you briefly describe your career after graduating undergrad? And I know you have kind of an interesting story for your undergrad, so.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I joined or graduated from Penn State about 12 years ago now, with majors in finance and biology. So I've been in the workplace for a while. After graduating, I joined our J&J FLDP, our Finance Leadership Development Program, completing 2 one-year rotations in what was our consumer sector as well as our pharmaceutical sector. Those were 2 very different rotations. One was quite strategic and the other was pretty technical. On a side note, highly recommend the program. So if anyone is interested in learning more, please reach out and we'll link it. But I've worked with J&J for my entire career. So I'm currently in my 8th position, serving as the finance director for the MedTech innovation team. My current role can be segmented into 3 main areas of responsibility. The first would be leading the financials for the EU MDR program, which is the European Union Medical Device Regulation. That's essentially a set of regulations that really ensures consistently high level of health and safety protections for citizens using our medical devices. The second part would be innovation portfolio management. So that is essentially leveraging financial analysis tools to drive our R&D pipeline investment decisions for the medtech sector of J&J. And then the third is a little bit of a catch-all of strategic initiatives, various work streams like gross profit improvement, business development activities, and others. So I've been in that role about 4 months now. Still new, enjoying it so far, but hopefully hard to summarize 12 years briefly. So hopefully that captured the gist of my time at J&J.
We'll get into more details with that, but if people didn't hear that correctly, I think you are probably our first panelist where part of your undergraduate, you were what, a biology major and finance, is that correct?
Yes, I did both. I started off with finance because I liked math, I liked analytical figures, and I always had a passion for biology, so I decided to do both and try to find a career where I could combine both backgrounds, and that's what led me to J&J.
You were the perfect candidate for that, probably. All right. Well, we will move now to Christie to tell us about your career since graduating.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christie, Seattle-based. I currently work at iSpot TV as a senior director of FP&A. I'm probably the oldest among the panelists today. I graduated a long, long time ago, more like 2 decades for my undergrad. So if you ask me, my first job was actually a teller. That is so unrelated to anything I'm doing right now. I've tried like cross industries. I work in accounts payable, accounts receivable, all the positions that you can think of. But my undergrad major was in finance. So I like around maybe like 6 to 8 years ago, I finally got a chance to, transfer from public accounting, but not Big Four, but Fortune 500 company, and back to a senior financial analyst job. And I really loved it. I like making impact. So I think finance gives you a little bit more like opportunities to make an impact throughout the organization than regular accounting. I mean, accounting is important, like, because like they safeguard the accuracy of the data. So finance can be the end consumer to like consume the accurate data to do all the necessary analysis and reporting. So I see both accounting and finance, they are like this, they go hand in hand. So it's not really about, like accounting is better or finance is better. For CMA, I got my CMA probably 7 to 8 years ago, got my CPA 10 years ago. If you ask me, like, if those credentials actually help me getting into the positions, I would say not so much initially, because like people, it actually helps you. Also, it can hurt you as well. If I'm being very like honest, it helps you because people think that you are more educated, you have more credibility because like those credentials are very hard to get. At the same time, people look at you differently. They will hold you like to a higher standard. So it's both pros and cons, if you ask me to be very blunt with that. So far, I think the CMA, it's more relatable to the job that I'm doing because finance involves a lot of analysis, and a big part of the CMA curriculum is about variance analysis and financial statement, reporting, looking at different numbers and stuff. So I think it's definitely a good route to pursue. And the last thing I want to add is that if you're working full time, which I was working full time when I was doing my CPN and CMA, it was extremely difficult. So I would highly encourage students, if they're still in college and then they want to start the CMA, credential earlier, please do so, because once you get into working a full-time job, it's very challenging to, manage both the CMA, prepping and your full-time job. Yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah.
And Christie, you might have said this already, but can you tell our students what iSpot TV does?
Sorry, I missed that. So, probably most of you guys have heard about a media research company called Nielsen. It's been around for many, many years. It's the biggest. And iSpot is actually a startup which has been around 10 to 12 years-ish. And then we're actually going against Nielsen. And the exciting part is that around 2 years ago, around the time that right before I joined iSpot, we actually got a Series D funding from Goldman Sachs for $325 million. So it's actually a pre-IPO startup. So if anyone wants to work for a startup, like they don't mind doing the grinding, they don't mind being in the creator mentality, that startup is for you. But if you want more structure, more work-life balance, startup is definitely not for you.
You're doing a lot of different roles. Great. Let's move on to last but certainly not least, Mason. Same thing for you. So what's happened since you graduated undergraduate?
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. I graduated undergrad 2021 from Washington University in St. Louis. I majored in finance. Kind of similar to Megan, I joined an FLDP program directly out of undergrad. So finance leadership development program. I knew I was interested in finance. I just didn't know where I wanted to work in. And corporate finance is a very wide umbrella. There's a lot of different positions inside of there. So I like the fact that I would be able to rotate and see a lot of different parts of the company and work in different functions. So I ended up working in 2 different functions for 3 separate teams. First one being FP&A, similar to Christie as well. I mean, to break down FP&A, it's forecast planning and analysis. So what we're doing is we're building out the budget, helping out with the forecasts that are going out, then comparing actuals to that budget. So how we performed versus how we thought we were going to perform. And my job kind of consisted of 3 things. First, I was building out the income statements and the P&L models. P&L is what the income statement is for those variance analysis meetings that we were having with these large business unit leaders. And then I was compiling that analysis and that commentary and pushing that out to our corporate team. Then our corporate team would trickle that down to our earnings reports. Becton Dickinson, the company that I was working with, is a medical device manufacturer. So it's also similar to Megan in the med device space. And I liked really 3 things while working in FP&A. One, I got a really high level view of the business. And I could see how the real world events were tying into affecting our P&L, like how this was during COVID. So how the supply chain effects of COVID were actually throwing off our gross profit. I learned a lot of technical skills in Excel and the P&L, and I was able to work with a lot of senior business leaders that have a lot of experience in the industry. My second position was on the accounting side. So the other point that Christy was talking about, I was working in revenue recognition. So kind of working to see how the contracts that we got from these specific hospitals built up into the revenue line or P&L. I really liked the technical accounting skills that I gained there. I was working on a team full of CPAs. So I was kind of able to pick their brains. And while I was actually on this team is what inspired me to get my CMA, because I wanted to upskill my technical expertise. So I like that granular level insight. And kind of after I finished the FLDP program, I took a step back and I really liked the rotational aspect of the program and the problem solving that it presented, which inspired me to want to pursue a career in consulting, strategy consulting to be exact. In order to do that, I ended up enrolling and applying into NYU Stern. I'm a first-year student, and I'll be going into consulting for an internship over the summer. So, it's me.
And Mason, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Becton Dickinson, they even help pay for your CMA and maybe MBA, or did I get that incorrect? Or you wish they did?
The second part, first part is true, yeah. So while I was in RevRec, yeah, they paid and sponsored me. Both they paid for my training, like the specific software that I use, and also to take the exam. So very fortunate for that. But
Wow.
taking, like what Christy was saying, taking it in undergrad, because it was a lot working and also studying for the CMA.
Yeah, if there's one thing students you get from this and you're inspired to get your CMA, I think all the panelists would agree. Do it while you're still in school, take advantage of that. I hate to tell you that you'll never get as much time as you have when you're still in college. So embrace it while you have it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. And some of you did touch on it, but I want to highlight it a little bit more. What motivated each of you to pursue a career in accounting or finance? And ultimately, what led you to pursue the CMA certification? So Mason, I think you kind of talked about it. Do you want to just reiterate?
Sure, yeah, I guess I'll take you even a step back. So my mother works in, she teaches at Morehouse College. She teaches entrepreneurship and small business management. So from a very young age, I was kind of getting spoon-fed a little bits of information about business. So I like to say that kind of planted the seed for my overall interest in finance and business. However, my motivation for the CMA kind of, one, it was a perfect opportunity. My company sponsored me to take it. So I was extremely fortunate for that, so I didn't have to worry about the cost. Second, I really wanted more context into like the why of what I was doing. So like why I was preparing these deliverables, why I was like building out these models, and the CMA was perfect for that. So as I'm studying that, I'm like able to apply what I'm learning to like what I'm doing on the job. So for example, revenue recognition is a portion of, I think, part 1 of the CMA. So as I was studying that, I was like, okay, well now I can see directly how that's applying to like the journal entries that I'm doing on the job. And then third, I'd say also probably most important is that it was great signaling of the hard skills that I learned for my future employers. So specifically during recruiting, like this past year, I was able to actually refer to the CMA as like, that was what like culminated my experience back at Becton Dickinson. Like that was like what I have to show for it. And it was a good touch point that's like, okay, this is something hard that he's done. So it was a good refresher on my skills as I prepare for my MBA.
Cool. All right, Christy, same to you. What finally made you get the CMA? And
The CMA, I guess it's like, don't quote me on this. I never, I think I'm just like an outlier, like a weirdo, I think. Cause I got my CPA and I was actually thinking about other credentials. I was under the impression that the more credentials that you get, it's actually easier for you to get promoted. I had that impression. So that's not the perfect reason to get a CMA. But at the same time, I do think the CMA, it's like the exam materials, it's actually super useful. I realized that after I got the credentials, but you know, just not the perfect reason to start it. So not a good example here.
all right, Megan, how about you?
And so we already touched on the fact that my background is a little bit atypical. So finance and biology is what led me to J&J, I think, and wanting to find a career where I could leverage both those skill sets. So when I was at J&J, I first did an internship in finance, and that really, I was exposed to the finance org where the leaders there really are business leaders with finance expertise. So that made me want to join J&J, leveraging both background, kind of that mindset and the ability to kind of positively impact patients' lives. So when I joined J&J, I went into the FLDP program, and that's when I was first introduced to CMA. It was highly recommended by some of my mentors. There are financial incentives at J&J to kind of get that certification. And I thought it was a really nice way to build on the corporate finance knowledge and get a bit deeper into accounting, because undergrad, I took 2 accounting courses. So J&J has a finance function. We don't have separate accounting and finance teams, and the expectation is that you're able to kind of know enough to be dangerous in both skill sets. So I felt like that was a really good way to give me confidence right entering my career that I had the right financial management skills to be successful, and really took the certification to be a well-rounded finance leader. I'd actually have a little bit of a different perspective where I enjoyed studying while I was in the FLDP program. The reason being, I found that the content was very relatable. As I was onboarding at work, I almost had the reference material and I could apply the skills real time. So I was probably one of those rule breakers that I took the second part first, because that was directly transferable to the role I was in. And then the second role I had was more technical accounting. I took the first part of the CMA. So I really just felt like it was a way. I mean, I was fortunate, right? I was able to study during the summertime by the pool, and that was my fun weekend activity, but I could then apply those concepts real time while I was at work, and yeah, it worked out pretty well for me.
So Megan, you just admitted you like studying, and you know.
I mean, as evidenced hopefully by like the double major, I love to learn. So I'm a little bit of a nerd. Like
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And then we love Johnson & Johnson is a big supporter of IMA and the CMA, so it's not surprising in that program that there were plenty of people that encouraged you to do that. And then
talked about it in a meeting earlier this afternoon. Yeah.
Perfect. And Drew, how about you? And I also want to say, Drew, you're also studying right now for the CPA, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yeah. To talk about, you know, what made you get it? The CMA.
Yeah, so I think it was a little bit of a mixture of what Mason and Christie said, in the sense of I wanted to continue to develop professionally, mainly from kind of my knowledge set. So I wanted to, so I started the CMA, studying for the CMA exams about 5 years after I had finished my undergraduate.
And
so
your undergrad was in accounting, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so there was quite a bit that I had studied in undergrad that I wanted to refresh myself on and kind of revisit. And so that was part of the reason I wanted to do the program. And then I think what I realized was I was kind of at a point in my career where I wanted to have sort of an external proof of the knowledge that I had acquired throughout my career so far. So I think being able to both better myself by studying for the exam and to pass it and show myself that I knew that material, but also as I'm looking to continue to grow my career, to be able to say that I'm a CMA, and I think it has benefited me a lot so far in my career.
Great. So I'm going to ask if, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but for our panelists, can you give us an example of specific CMA concepts and skills that you have used on the job? So Megan, our studious person, can you kick us off?
Yes, I can. Bear in mind, I took the CMA 12 years ago, so the order of my coursework might have changed a bit. But I think I mentioned earlier, I did the CMA when I was in the FLDP program. So my first rotation within that program was focused on strategic planning, new product development, valuations, and then ultimately I was responsible for influencing decision-making for the consumer sector leadership. So that was very transferable to part 2 of the exam for me, right? Some of that valuation, strategic finance focus. And then the second rotation I had was when I took part 1 of the exam. And that was within FP&A. So I think Drew mentioned kind of what the FP&A function is a little bit, or maybe Mason as well, but it was more accounting heavy. So I was doing a bit more planning, budgeting, P&L analytics, and that was relevant for me at the time to part 1. And again, just kind of taking those exams as I was onboarding to those roles really just helped kind of double down on the content. And then I still continue to leverage the concepts throughout my career. I do still have the study materials somewhere in my office here that once in a while I'll pull out and reference. So definitely transferable to corporate finance from my experience.
Perfect. And Christie, how about you? You're doing so much in this startup, so.
Yeah, I do like the startup environment quite a bit. Yeah, like basically for like CMA, a lot of the variance analysis, especially when you're supporting like salespeople, top line growth. I remember one part of it's about like whether it's a price like mix or like a volume mix, which part of it is contributing more to the revenue growth. That's very relatable. And I like how much like recently the IMA chapter has done a lot for the students that like have other, courses for students to take, just like the 2 courses that you just mentioned at the beginning, the analytics. It's actually a big part of FP&A. There are a lot of FP&A is very broad. You have to be like, well versed in accounting, with numbers, data analytics, sometimes, data mining as well. So I really think CMA has evolved a lot and served a lot for the community. Yeah.
Great. And then Mason, how about you?
Yeah, so I guess I was taking my CMA while I was in my revenue recognition role. So that was something completely new to me. I majored in finance. I didn't really have much accounting knowledge. So working on a team of CPAs, I wanted to kind of prove my knowledge base really quickly. So the CMA actually helped with that. Part 1 actually has as I mentioned before, a revenue recognition portion. So I felt like after I took, especially part 1, I could more confidently answer a lot of the ad hoc requests that I get from other functions asking about why we can't recognize revenue, like even though we've received payment for it, and understanding that's like a deferred revenue versus a revenue question. And then second, in FP&A, it also helped me see the big picture and like connect the work that I was doing in revenue recognition back to FP&A. Like for example, I think cash cycle is a portion of the second part of the exam. So understanding why like we want to lower our cash cycle, so bring in revenue as quick as possible and delay our payments as long as possible, and why that's good for our income statement. So those are I guess I'd say those 2 are the main 2 applications.
Great. And then Drew, how about you?
Yeah, I think the main one that comes to mind is kind of on the financial reporting side of things. So, and I'm not sure which section it's included in, but things like the statement of cash flow and revisiting some of those items have been really helpful in the roles that I've had. There have been a few items that have been, as I was studying I've changed roles, I think, during the duration of my study period. And so my responsibilities kind of evolved, and there were things that were included. I was like, oh, well, this is interesting, but I'll never need this. And sure enough, in a later role, I have needed it, especially working for a global organization, things like currency exchange, which is included in the study materials, has been really relevant. So
great. And one thing that hopefully the students picked up on, and I've heard, I think almost all of you say it in some capacity, but getting the CMA gave you confidence, and it really showed you that you understood it and that you could speak to it. I know, Christie, you kind of touched on this, and from other panels that I've done, I've realized that a lot of people who are working in management or corporate accounting or corporate finance with the CMA, they're always explaining the numbers and the reason why to other people. And I think, Christie, you kind of mentioned it with sales, where you might be looking at reports and information, but you have to tell marketing why certain decisions are being made. And you're not always dealing with someone who is numbers based, but when you're a CMA, you're the one that's actually taking all that data and information and then helping that company to make those decisions to move them forward. And I think that's one of the great things about having the CMA. So I'm going to ask this question. So what is something, because again, these are students and they're starting to learn about, you know, what's their first job going to be, or what does it mean to work in accounting and finance? But what is something you didn't realize you would be doing a lot of in your career that you never would have guessed as a student? So Christie, I'll put you on the spot for this one.
Sorry, I was like answering a question. Would you mind repeating that again?
Oh yeah. So what is
My bad.
something you didn't realize you would be doing a lot of in your career when you were a student?
I guess it's actually not so much related to the credentials, but it's actually dealing with different personalities. A lot of it is like sometimes like we might tend to put a lot more focus on the numbers and on the credentials, but at the end of the day, it's actually working with different personalities. Especially for me, I'm Asian. I grew up in a different culture that I would have a different communication style. Like to me, that is obvious. Maybe to someone else, it's not obvious. That it's being able to make sure people understand what you're trying to say. That's would help you move up faster and then be more successful. Because at the end of the day, FP&A, a big part of it, it's actually influencing behaviors and promoting like efficiency within the organization, especially in a startup. Everyone is fighting for resources, but you only have a small pie. How do you navigate through that? I think that's the part that I'm still learning until today. Yeah.
How about you, Drew?
I think one thing that I've been kind of surprised with is the sort of overall shift from in-person work to remote and hybrid. Kind of the so my role was fully remote, and whenever I was an undergrad, I never would have thought about having a fully remote role. So I think that's just been a little bit surprising to see. But I believe it's one of the strengths of the accounting profession is that we're one of the number one types of roles that you can work remotely, and there's a lot of benefits that come with that. So I think that was something that I just never thought of in undergrad, was that would be a possibility.
Interesting. All right. How about you, Mason?
Similar to kind of what Christie's point was saying, like as a student, I was really focused on the technical skills. So like hard skills like accounting, finance, Excel. Didn't realize how that's just one part of the equation, and arguably a smaller part of the equation than the soft skills. So like networking, coffee chats. And after working, I realized how important that was, not only in like just making yourself feel more comfortable at your job, but like establishing kind of who's going to get that next movement up in the hierarchy. So recently I've been making a lot more of a concentrated effort to network when I can and to have coffee chats with people that I'm interested in, like just picking their brains. One, it just exposes yourself to more of your interests, but also it shows people that like it's a better way of connecting. And these are businesses where it's like big on connections. So although some hard skills like the CMA and like Excel are really important, the soft skills shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, and honestly, when I've been working with students for a number of years, and I've also been working, it is a skill. And when you talk about a skill, it's something you have to work on. And I think a lot of times when I talk with students, they get nervous about networking. And I say, it's not easy for any of us. You know, even someone like me that likes to talk or do presentations like this, it's difficult, but you just have to keep putting yourself out there, talking to people, talking to your students, getting involved in clubs on your campus. Like these are all going to help build those skills. And just a plug for IMA, I talked about courses that we have. we have a lot of soft skill courses as well. So I love that you guys have brought that up. And then Megan, how about you? What's something you didn't realize you'd be doing a lot of?
I might give 2 answers.
Okay, that's allowed.
I think more so from a business lens. I think coming out of college, I was pleasantly surprised by the immediate impact that we could have on the business. As an example, I think a role that we had within a portfolio finance team in our pharmaceutical sector, I was responsible for shaping the entire pharmaceutical outlook, spanning P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, pipeline valuations for a 5-year outlook, a 10-year outlook in a 50 billion plus business. So I think that to me was like, I thought you had to be much higher up in the organization, right, to be able to have that experience and that skill set. And I think some of the things that make you successful in that, you touched upon, Mary, right? It's being able to visualize, explain the financials to various functions that may not understand finance, but do it in a way that can help bring the right stakeholders together and inform that decision making. So that was cool to see early on. And then I think the second is probably around people leadership. I think the amount of time that I see spent on people leadership, mentoring, recruiting, I think for me, that's one of the reasons I like working at J&J, because of the immense focus on people development. And I'd say early on in my career, I was a beneficiary of that, right? I was fortunate to have a number of sponsors, mentors that really helped me navigate, right, that transition from college. And now I like to think I'm trying to pay that forward as a people leader. Very involved in Penn State recruiting efforts as an example, and teaching courses there. So I think those are probably the 2 things I was not expecting out of college.
Yeah. So I'm looking at some questions that are coming in. One question that I noticed, someone was asking about Excel skills, and that made me think, so for students, if you're talking to students right now, was there any class that was extremely beneficial to you in undergrad, or any class that you're like, oh, if I could go back and do it again, I would take that class, and it really would translate to your career? So whoever wants to answer, feel free to speak up. Come on, Megan, you're my education girl. Is there any?
Mine's a very probably simplistic one. A lot of the classes that I took undergrad were geared towards more Wall Street, right? And I think taking a class that was Finance 305W for me was a corporate finance introduction class. And I think that was the most beneficial because it opened my eyes to what a career in corporate finance could look like, introduced me to discounted cash flow model valuations, and led me to take an internship in finance for the first time. So for me, that was probably the most beneficial or most memorable one.
Okay. Anyone else?
The one that comes to mind. Oh, go ahead, Mason.
I was just gonna say, I guess recent memory. Management communication would probably be like my most class in undergrad. It was like taught us how to write and create a meaningful email, one that can actually influence people and persuade people. These are like kind of things that you're expected to know in the workforce, but like they don't really teach you. Like in school is like how to actually communicate with people like effectively once you arrive in the workforce. And then I guess onto the question of Excel, I'm actually in a class now in my MBA program called Financial Statement Modeling. So if they have that version of the class at the undergrad level, highly suggested. It's like purely all in Excel. You're modeling out the income statement for a company similar that you would do for any like a valuation course. So highly suggest any course that's like that that's available.
Anyone else? I did see a question that I'm going to put out there. It comes from Stephanie, and she says, panelists, in your opinion, what do you think is the most important aspect to consider when choosing career path in the vast accounting field? So, any insight, like how did you get into industry? I know, Christie, you started in public accounting. Drew, you worked for a nonprofit. So if anyone wants to give some insight into that. I'll say it again real quick. What do you think is the most important aspect to consider when choosing a career path, or how did you choose it? Did you know you wanted to go into industry? So
my advice, maybe, I guess what I did is take the opportunity undergrad to try different things, right? If you can do 2 internships in very different fields, then you'll get to understand what areas you're passionate about and what you want to pursue full time. I actually mentioned I did biology undergrad, and my first job was in an R&D lab, right? I was doing cell culture development scale up for an oncology drug, and I loved the work. I actually did it 2 summers, and then I found that a lot of my colleagues were aspiring to almost move out of the lab so they could help deploy resources to those in the labs and prioritize and make those business decisions. I'm like, well, that kind of sounds like finance in some sense. So then I did a internship in J&J Finance, and then when I was in J&J Finance, my supervisor sent me over to the R&D organization so I could learn about clinical trials per day. So I felt like through those different experiences, I was able to kind of cultivate what a longer term career could look like for me. Because there's so many things you could do with accounting and finance. So as much as you can now, use your undergrad opportunity to test and learn, do case studies on campus to maybe learn at different companies. Go to career fairs and just talk, message people on LinkedIn. But yeah, use this time now so that you can figure out what you want. Not that once you start a career, you're set on it forever. But this is a good time to kind of shape that.
Anyone else? Drew, how did you get into a nonprofit like Habitat for Humanity?
Yeah, so I kind of intentionally went into the nonprofit industry just because it was something I was passionate about. But I think from a higher level, sort of the process that I went through somewhat unconsciously was to kind of look at the different domains of my life, sort of the different areas, both my professional, my personal, just sort of all those, however you kind of divide that up. And I basically evaluated different paths and kind of like Megan was saying, sort of different options. And I think that's where it's really helpful to try different things out. And I found what I felt like was the best that would make me successful in each of those areas. So I kind of defined what success looked like to me in each of those areas, and then chose a path that I felt like would kind of lend itself towards success in those areas. And I think that's like Megan said, exploring those different internships, doing as much as you can to see what the different areas look like, but also sort of doing that introspection and saying, here's what's important to me, here's what I'd like to do in my career, and try to find that alignment where possible. And I sort of did that exercise over time, and that's where it led me to the nonprofit industry.
Yeah, great. Anyone else want to chime in? One thing that I will say just from working with students, and this is what I think is great about accounting and finance, it's not just accounting and finance, but think about what motivates you or what's your interest. If you're someone that enjoys music and that's your passion, guess what? They need accounting and finance people in the music industry. There's so much data analytics with Spotify and different music programs. Like, really just think about what it is that interests you. And then when you're a management accountant or a corporate finance person, it's kind of what someone said earlier. You're actually helping to do things for that company that are going to move it forward. Like, you're actually making a difference within those companies. So I think having that background in accounting and finance really does open the door to explore what it is that you want to do. So for the sake of time, I always like to end on this question, and I know we didn't get through everything, but this was a great discussion to hear from all of you. But what would your advice be to your younger self as a student, or what do you want to tell the students as they are looking ahead to their future? So Drew, I'll start with you because you're at the top of my screen.
Sure. So I think I would encourage you to kind of do that exercise I just mentioned of determining what success looks like to you. But also sort of on a related note, there's sort of a saying that it's a marathon and it's not a sprint. And I think that's something I have to remind myself in my career is that's true. I think it's also, sort of expand the metaphor just a little bit. Sometimes your career is also a triathlon. It looks different at different times in different seasons. So I think just to determine what success looks like to you, and then to just invest in yourself through things like the CMA, and to just stay at it while you're moving towards that measure of success.
Great. And Mason, how about you? You're talking to your former self. What do you want to say?
Yeah. So kind of not to reiterate too much on what Drew just said, but find out what you want to do early on. Try to understand the why of why you want to do it and explore. So combining all those points and kind of to double click into one of the things that Megan mentioned was like LinkedIn and like the importance of like you can actually search by your school and look at alumni that are in the field that you're interested in, and the alumni are often more likely to speak to you and like have set up a conversation with you. And don't be afraid to like set up and have conversations with people that are in fields that you're interested in, and do that early on. That's kind of one thing that I wish I did, because that can give you a good taste of what it's like to be in that industry or that field. And then on a third note, kind of like casting a wide net with the internships that you're applying to, jobs that you're applying to. You don't necessarily have to make that choice, but it's always good to have that opportunity so that you can accept it if that's something that actually interests you and you find that out later on.
Great. How about you, Christie?
I would say that like during my time, I don't think LinkedIn what's available yet. So I would say that if I'm talking to my younger self again, it's not to make a decision too early, because a lot of the definition, like what Drew and Mason mentioned, like definition of success, and the definition of success could be pretty fluid, like during different stages of life. So you know, like don't be too hard on yourself and make a too early decision, like, you know, I can only be in public accounting or I can only be in FP&A. Some people might not even enjoy a W-2 job, but they can utilize a CMA credential to open their own business. And it's still providing, you know, the service, still making an impact in the community. So I guess it's like being comfortable with, you know, changes. It's actually, it will help you navigate. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And Megan, how about you? Final parting words.
What I would have told my younger self. So for me, I think what I heard a lot was networking, set up one-on-one, all of that. I think what I've learned throughout my career and what I wish I would have told myself in the beginning was look for those authentic connections, right? Don't connect to connect. Look for who you resonate with, leaders that you appreciate their style. And as you go through your jobs, it could be a former boss, right? Ends up becoming a mentor and a sponsor going forward, and being able to kind of maintain that network, I found really helps get your foot in the door, right? For new job opportunities, because I'm thinking, right, Mason, I know a couple of folks from J&J that went to BD that I was chatting with. Not that I'm looking to leave J&J, but like it is nice to just have that network and hear about the various opportunities going. And then I think similar to what Christie said, in the sense of having a growth and learning mindset. Because for me, what I've seen is the role that you enter doesn't have to be the same role that you leave at the end of the day. So being able to go in, looking for efficiencies, process improvements, for areas that maybe aren't as fun for you, but use that to free up time so that you can really focus in and double down on the areas that you're passionate about. Because in my experience, right, that's where you're going to do the best work and really set yourself apart. So yeah, I think the authentic network and the growth mindset for me is, wish someone would have told me that a younger me that 12 years ago.
I love it. Thank you so much for what you said. And I want to thank our panelists. They definitely gave a lot of great insight. You got to hear a lot about what they are doing with their companies. Can you see the Gleim on here? Is that okay? I want to thank our sponsor, Gleim CMA Review, for sponsoring this webinar. And if you did enjoy this, so I think a lot of what they said, like I said, every time we do one of these webinars, just based on what I see coming in the chat, based on what our panelists say, it takes where the conversation is. There's always seems to be a different theme that resonates. I highly suggest for you to attend our next panel series. Again, we have someone from Microsoft, Ebony Wilkerson. She got her CMA very later in life. Himanshi Ray, who is the Director of Finance with Global Supply Chain with Starbucks Corporation, and then Eric Leonard, so Vice President of Global Services with Johnson Johnson. And I think what my parting words are going to be to the students. So everyone on this panel, Drew, Mason, Christie, Megan, they're IMA members. Everyone that's going to be on this next panel with Eric, Himanshu, and Ebony, they are IMA members. And our panelists today said, you know, how important it is to build that network. That is what IMA is. It is accounting and finance professionals who are part of this organization. So I want to thank everyone for both attending this, especially our panels, and to Gleim. And I'm going to leave my contact information up here, especially for my students and the faculty if you want to reach out to me.